MBS here. Not long ago you saw me do the O-rings on this car. I changed from nitrile seals to Viton seals, depending how you want to pronounce it. So now I want to do a closure on GTR XU-1 tuning and cover the different states of tune. There are really only two, and that's performance tuning and general street driving tuning. Okay, it's virtually only the two. And we're then going to cover a few comments I had from my YouTube channel. A couple of things were said there that need explaining, to say the least. Okay, for that. Now, I really encourage you to do your own tuning. It's not hard. If you followed all my videos, and there'll be a link at the end of this video to take you to my GTR XU-1 page, where every time I work on a GTR XU-1, I've got it on there. You're going to need an airflow meter, guys. No doubt about it. One of these things. Alright? They're still available. You can get them. I think you can get them from the UK. Absolutely essential if you want to do triple Carby synchronization. If you've got one of these little fellows, okay, pretty old school. I gave these up years ago. They're just not accurate enough. Okay, not if you want to get a real good synchronization. So I wouldn't use it, but if that's all you got, that's all you got. I'd invest whatever these things cost and get one of those if you want to keep your cars in tune. If you got one of these old fellas, these are pretty old school as well. They don't work too well on an XU-1. As soon as you put them on, you'll notice the idle speed will change because they're too restrictive in the airflow to get that bob inside this cylinder to move up and down, so you can synchronize it. The best you can do with these is put it on, quick look, take it off, and just do that. So you could get away with that one. Okay, you're going to need probably a ruler, verniers, yeah, definitely one of these little electrical screwdrivers with a 5mm tip, and you'll see later how important that 5mm tip is going to be for us. 5/8 spanner, so you can undo the lock nut on the jet assembly if you're going to change your O-rings. Alright, basic tools, guys, nothing much there, and that's it. I use this same screwdriver for synchronization of the carburetor screws, no problem. There's a little stubby screwdriver I've got here somewhere. Yeah, there it is, fell down into the engine bay. Not the best place for it, so you can adjust your jets from underneath. You're going to need some machine oil. Okay, this is what Singer sewing machine oil, and that's about it. And yeah, if you're doing O-rings, get yourself some Molykote 55 O-ring grease. Yeah, alright, that's the good stuff now that I'm using instead of the rubber grease. Okay, and that's, you don't want much more than that really. You might need a few little bib bobs, but that's it for tooling. So let's get on to the tune. Okay, race tune. If you're going to set this up and you're going to flog it all the time, you'd set it up in race trim. That is 2 1/4 turns down on the jet from being level with the bridge. And you know what the bridge is in the CD Strummy, it's that little bit the piston slams down on. Okay, that's called the bridge. So you screw your jet right up till it's level with the bridge, take it down to 2 1/4 turns. Okay. The 150 CDs are different to the 175 CDs. They have a slightly different setting, and so if you start around about 2 1/4 turns, you can't go wrong from there. And go from there, guys. Once you've set those up, you synchronize it, then you just check your mixtures, make sure they're okay, and we'll cover that soon. And that's as easy as that. Make sure you don't have oil in the dash pots if you're going race trim, alright, or high performance trim. If you're going to flog it all the time, the oil in there is just going to slow you down a little bit. Not too much, but it will bog down a little bit and won't accelerate quite as quick. Alright, and I'm going to cover that in the comments that I got from a few people. If they're brand new, you shouldn't have any dramas of throttle shafts. Alright, if the discs aren't worn, and I'll throw up a picture of a worn out disc. So if everything's new and you've set your jets down 2.25 turns from scratch, it should be a breeze to set up. It's just a matter of synchronizing and getting your mixture correct. Now you may have to individually adjust each carburetor, like they're not all probably going to end up at 2.25 turns down. On the jet assembly you may find one is a quarter of a turn out to the others. That's fine. You're setting it up individually for the cylinders that you're feeding. Alright, so there may be a little discrepancy there. That's fine. So when it's new, it's a piece of cake. You'll get adjustability out of your idle speed screws. There'll still be plenty of adjustment there, and everything will be honky-dory. All you have to do then is get your linkages adjusted. I generally take the front and rear linkage off so that I can adjust all the carburetors independently, and then once I've got them all set up, synchronized, then I whack the linkages on and try and get them synchronized from there, and they all come back to idle. They're still synchronized, part throttle, they're synchronized, and make sure you're getting full throttle. Yeah? Alright, so get someone to put their foot on the floor and make sure that you can't open them up any wider. Otherwise you're going to lose horsepower if you're not getting full throttle. Now of course you're going to have to check for vacuum leaks. Okay, make sure you haven't got any on the intake manifold, base gaskets, and the temperature compensator if you've got one fitted like this car has. Check the O-ring at the base of the compensator. Now if that's leaking, you'll pick it up through the channel at the front of the carburetor base where the air cleaner bolts on. You would have seen that in the video on this car when I did the O-rings. You can put a piece of paper up against it, see if it sucks it in. That'll give you a vacuum leak. Or you can use the stethoscope and have a listen, see if it's leaking air there. The other place it can leak is this big gasket. Yeah, that's on the outside of this unit. Now that'll create an external vacuum leak. It won't go through the passage at the base of the air horn there. So you'll have to listen to that with a stethoscope and see if it's leaking externally. Alright, any leaks there is going to make you want to screw the jets down to make it richer, because it's going to be too lean with vacuum leaks. Doesn't matter where the vacuum leak's coming from. Could be your brake booster, could even be leaking, yeah? So you'd have to check all that stuff. Then you can adjust your carburetors and they'll adjust fine. So that's a new setup. So what if you're working with old carburetors and you're not quite sure of their condition? In that case, I would remove the tops of all your carburetors and start afresh. Yeah? The only thing you can't check is your float level. Well, actually you can, but that's a tricky little method to determine your float level, and I'm actually not going to cover that because it might be construed differently by different people and you may stuff it up a little bit. So let's assume your float levels are correct as a second-hand setup. Remove all your tops, check your diaphragms, check that the jet is sitting flush, or your needle, sorry, is sitting flush into the piston. It's pretty hard to tell if your jet's worn or your needle's worn. You may be able to see signs of wear on your needle. If so, throw the needle away and get a new one. If you're going to do that, replace the jet too at the same time, so you've got a new setup, okay? Because if they're worn, you're going to find that your jets are going to be screwed up considerably from that 2-turn position. You may end up with maybe 1 turn because it's worn so bad. So if you know that you've taken them up, you've taken them down 2 turns, and then you're doing the piston test to check your mixture strength, and you're still screwing your jets up and up and up, you've got worn jet or a worn needle, okay? Or your float level is too high, all right? So that is the third factor that we can't check. So yeah, that gives you a bit of a signal there that you've got a problem. So replace your jet, replace your needle, and just hope that your throttle discs aren't too badly worn, and that'll only affect your it'll affect your synchronization, but it'll also affect where you put the idle speed screw. You may have to wind it right off to actually get it to idle at the right speed, because it's sucking so much air past the disc, false air, and therefore you've got to keep screwing that idle speed screw out, and the spring becomes loose and ineffective. That's a good sign that your throttle shafts and your discs are worn. So you have to remove your carburetors and replace your discs and throttle shafts, okay? So if you come against that problem, that's pretty easy. And then you start again, then you may as well say you've got a new setup because you've replaced everything. And if you've gone to that trouble anyway, you take your fuel bowl off and you check your float level. Yeah, just rebuild the Carby. Okay, don't muck around taking shortcuts. I've done heaps of shortcuts on these Toranas I've been working on, and they've never worked out for me. Never. Never once have I gone, like as you saw with the O-ring. Then we discovered diaphragm was torn on the number 3. Washer missing out of number 2. It just became a drama. I should have just taken the tops right off to begin with, like I'm telling you now. Just go ahead, take the tops off, start from scratch. And like I said, the only thing you haven't checked is your float level. So, and it's as easy as that, guys. So if you set up a second-hand set of carburetors, I would start at around about 2 turns down on the jet from level with the bridge, and then move from there. This is where your 5mm screwdriver comes in handy when you're adjusting your carburetors while it's running. So it's at operating temperature, yeah, you've got it running around about that 900, 950, maybe 1000. It's, you know, still needs a little bit of tinkering, and you're checking your mixture strength. So how do you check your mixture is correct if you haven't got a exhaust gas analyzer up its tailpipe? You use a little screwdriver like this, 5mm end, you put it in underneath the piston, and you twist it and lift the piston up, okay? If the engine speed increases 20, 30, 40 RPM, you're running too rich, okay? So you need to screw your jet up maybe a quarter of a turn, all right? So do that for each carburetor to make sure that if you're going to go up a quarter, you need to do a quarter on each, or you may not have to do it on the middle carb, who knows? It's an individual carb setup for the cylinders that the carburetor is feeding. If you lift it up and the idle stays the same and only drops 10 or 20 RPM, beautiful. That's where you leave it. Okay, that is pretty good. But if you have to readjust your idle speed from 1000 down to 900, just check it again. Just lift the piston up and check your synchronization again. Make sure that they're all synchronized with your flow meter that you went and bought. Yeah. And you just do that again until you've got it idling at 900, and you can lift the piston up and notice no change. If you lift it up and it dies, just about stalls, it's way too lean. You have to screw your jet down. Alright, now that's the correct method for checking mixture strength on a CD Stromberg carburetor on whatever engine it's fitted. Doesn't matter. GTR, XU-1, Rover, Mini Minor, they've got SUs, works on the same thing. They've got a little pin on the side of the 150 Stromberg on the XU-1s, the LC. You can lift that pin up, and that pin is the same as the screwdriver lifting it up, because 175s don't have that pin when they've got the temperature compensator fitted. Okay, so that's an easy test for mixture strength, and that will be perfect. And just as a side note, I've got a couple of tuning manuals actually that tell you once you've got that mixture right, screw your jet up until you lose about 15-20 RPM. Okay, so what you're really doing is leaning it off a little bit. I don't recommend that. I prefer to have the best idle, because there's no other manuals that I've seen on Rovers, Minis, whatever, that tell you to screw the jet slightly leaner once you get to that perfect spot. Alright, so we want it on the perfect spot. But if you want to pick up just that incy-bincy more economy, yeah, screw your jet up 1/8 of a turn when you're finished, just to make it just that fly shit leaner. Alright, it won't cause you any harm. But don't go a quarter of a turn up or half a turn up. That'll be ridiculously lean. You'll backfire and you'll burn your diaphragm, alright, from the backfire. It won't last very long at all. Okay, what else can I cover there? So we've covered the piston movement up and down. We've covered air leaks on the compensator. Once you've eliminated any air leaks there, you go along and tune it up just as I've described there. And if you want more clarification on that, watch all my other videos that I've covered. Like my original video I did 25 years ago now, is pretty good. The only thing that I didn't cover in that was the temperature compensator, variations in jet height that you may experience, and I didn't show you the piston lift method of checking your mixture in that video. But I've covered that in future videos along the way. Alright, I just remembered that if you haven't got verniers, you can use a steel ruler to put on the bridge and bring your jet up to meet the steel ruler. So once the steel ruler starts rocking, you've got the jet too high. So just take it down a little bit until it's flush. Yeah, that's probably an easy way to do it without the verniers going down the depth of the jet until you get it to zero. Alright, and we've shown you how to centralise jets. That's very important. Once you screw the jet right up and you put your dash pots back in and you've replaced your diaphragms as necessary, whatever you had to do there, you would need to centralise your jet, and I've covered that in previous videos, so just have a look at those to see how that's done. Then you can screw your jet down to 2 turns and use that as the starting point. Now I've got tune-up specs here for LC and LJ, and I should mention also at this point, you notice I haven't talked about ignition at all, and I'm not. Your ignition's perfect, yeah? Nod your head and say yes, the ignition is perfect. Timing is good, centrifugal advance is good, all that stuff's good, yeah, because it's a waste of time working with carburetors if your ignition system isn't any good. Now, on the LC, there are 2 engines fitted to that, and it doesn't have a real true Bathurst cam in it either. It's lumpy, but it's not that lumpy. The LJ came out with a very lumpy cam, and it's got the timing specs in here. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these tuning spec sheets. I've got that on my website under the workshop manuals. You'll be able to go there and find these spec sheets. And it tells you how many turns you should start with. Let's see if I can find it. 2.5 turns. That's for a 70-72, that's LC. 150 Strombergs, and 2.25 turns on the LJ. So I never start them at that. I prefer 2. Alright, LC and LJ, and you can move from there. Yeah, like I said, you use the piston lift test to see if it's lean or it's rich or it's perfect. Okay, when you're tuning like that and you've got the Carbys perfect, you must put oil in the damper. Alright, otherwise the piston lifts up too quick and you may get a backfire. And the oil is your accelerator pump, guys. If you didn't know that, if you haven't seen that written on my website under the CD Stromberg carburetor section, I'm going to tell you right now, that's what the oil is for. You start off with light machine oil, you put it into the piston about 3/4 of the way up, and you drive your plunger back in, and I'll take that one out, and you'll feel it suction. When you get it down to about there, you'll get resistance, and then you push it in. Alright, you know you've got enough oil in it then. Without an accelerator pump in a carburetor, let's forget CD Stromberg, just 1-barrel Stromberg, any carburetor, they've all got accelerator pumps, yeah? What happens if they don't have an accelerator pump that works? Buh. The car dies, backfires, stalls. It's the same thing for a CD Stromberg. Because it hasn't got a physical accelerator pump, they had to find a way to make the mixture richer just on that initial takeoff. And that's what the oil does against that damper. It slows the piston down enough for the fuel to catch up, because the depression underneath that piston gets greater and it draws the fuel out, but it lags behind the air. And so to get the fuel to catch up, they slow the piston lift just that little bit with the oil, allows the fuel to catch up and act like an accelerator pump. Just gives it that slightly richer mixture initially, yeah? And that's really the whole secret of the oil. If you don't have oil in there, the piston just goes straight up. Fine if you're doing a race tune, yeah? If you're doing a street tune and you want drivability, you must put oil in there, especially if you've lifted these pistons up using the screwdriver or the pin on the 150 and you got the mixture perfect, then you're going to need an accelerator pump to stop it from backfiring. Put some oil in. If you've screwed the jet down to 2.5 turns, it's going to be rich enough. Alright, you probably won't get a backfire from that. Alright, so that's the difference between setting up for a race tune and setting up for a street tune. Yeah, I think I've pretty well covered it, guys. Apart from the synchronisation, which I covered earlier, take the linkages off, set them up. One middle carburetor, set it up, then set the two end ones accordingly, and get your balance right. All right, and that's it for carburetor synchronisation. How easy is that? It's not very hard at all. Obviously, you're going to need a tacho as well. Yeah, you don't want to be doing this by ear, judging whether you drop 20 RPM or not, because it's pretty hard when the engine's lumping away. So yeah, fit up a tacho to it, and yeah, keep an eye on that tacho. And that's it for that. How about I answer some questions? I think I've probably already answered them actually, but let's have a look. Okay, here's a good one. When these were used as daily drivers in the 70s and 80s, I used to get them coming in not running right because some clown had put oil in them and wound the jets up. Well, okay. Why are the jets up in the first place? Alright, maybe the needles are worn, the jets are worn, who knows. But that's not a legitimate argument there, because they have to have oil, alright, as I've explained to you. Alright, so this guy is obviously likes to set up race tune, and I can't believe he doesn't mention it in there, but I would assume that no one's ever complained about his race tune. They've never fouled plugs up on a weekly, 2-weekly basis. I get that all the time when I was tuning these things. Plugs fouling, running too rich because the jet's down too far. Runs great if you thrash it, but as soon as you drive it around town and you take your foot off, it just fouls plugs up all the time. Oh, forget it. Alright, okay, he goes on to say, because Minis and Jags get huge flat spots without oil, it was assumed XU-1s needed oil too. Well, I've explained to you what the oil's for. The accelerator pump. There's no argument there, guys. It's if you've got it set over rich, like this fella has, you may get away with no oil because you're constantly foot flat to the floor driving like a maniac. Okay, that's fine. That's just one way of doing your tune-up. I'm not saying anything against him, but his comments are suggesting that I'm doing it wrong, okay? And I'm not. I'm doing it exactly the way they're meant to be set up for street driving. Yeah, okay? Not, if I wanted to do race tune and I finished this carburetor, you saw me adjust this one, I would just screw the jets out a further half turn and say, here, go and race it. They're synchronized. They were just set on the perfect mixture, but that without the oil in there, you got no accelerator pump, so you need to compensate for that. You need to run rich. So you screw the jet down half a turn and put it out to 2 1/4 or thereabouts. All right, so that's where his argument is coming from, I would think. Despite, yeah, he reckons they run great, drivable despite the cam profile and the low vacuum. Having the jets only screwed down 1 1/2 turns will give them a flat spot. Well, no shit. Of course they will. Okay, you've set it up pretty well where it should be. I would say probably around 1 3/4, 1 1/2 turns is where most of mine turn up when they're brand new and they're not worn out. Okay, and that'll give them a big flat spot. Yeah, and putting oil in hides the lean condition. Okay. That's that one answered, I think. Now here's another one. Before turning the fuel screws, that's the jets, you should know how many turns are already on each carby. Yes, you should. Okay. If you've set this up and you've screwed it up flush and you've taken it down 2 turns to start and then you've done a little bit of mucking around with it, you should roughly know where all your jets are positioned, yeah? That way you will know if one is turned more than the other. Well, one will be turned more than the other because, as I said, we're individually tuning them. Alright? In my first video 25 years ago, I said all must be the same. What I didn't add in is that they may vary a little bit, okay? But I've covered that later on. I've given you a little bit more information on that in later videos. Each one should be the same turns for adjusting fuel rate for each carburetor. Well, as I just said, you may find that they're not all exactly the same. There could be a 1/4 turn variation between your carburetors. Alrighty. So that's acceptable, okay, that's fine. Don't worry about if one's a quarter of a turn up higher than the other or a quarter of a down lower than the others. That's fine. If you've used your screwdriver method and twisted it and lifted the piston up that 5mm and the idle speed stayed the same, then you've adjusted that carburetor fine. Okay, you don't need to synchronize it or make it the same height as another one. All right, and I think that's basically what I wanted to cover, guys. So I wanted to let you know these few little things, just so you can get the confidence to do it yourself. And I mean, if you've got one of these guys, really worth the investment. I don't know what they're worth. Even if they're worth $100 or $200, it doesn't matter. It's a lifesaver. It's a beautiful piece of equipment. Look after it. This is well and truly 30 years old or plus. Great little tool. I've always looked after it and taken care of it. And that's it, young people. I can't go any more than that. I think I've covered everything I want to cover in this video. I really hope you get confident and try and tackle this yourself. If you go astray along the way, guys, come back to YouTube or my website, have a look at the video again and see what you've missed in progression of the job, and see how you went wrong somewhere if you've lost your way. So just go back to scratch, okay, and just do it exactly like I've done it. It's not hard, and as you see, very little equipment in today's world. 20 years, or more than 20 years ago, I had an oscilloscope that I had at the same time, exhaust gas analyzer up the back, okay, but I still always used the screwdriver method to get the mixture right, and lo and behold, oh, the mixture out the tailpipe was pretty damn good. All right, pretty well spot on. So it works, okay? Without the fancy tools, you can do this just with this little bit of equipment that I've shown you here. Well, there you go. Hope you got something out of all that. Coming up shortly will be a link to my playlist of other XU-1 videos that are relevant to this subject. I hope you enjoy them. I'll catch you in another video.